97.3 ESPN presents The Sports Bash with Mike Gill. It's time for Football at 4 with Geoff Mosher, powered by the Inside the Birds podcast.
I love coaching this football team. I love coaching those players in there.
Now, live from inside the Matt Black Kia Studios, it's Football at 4.
All right, Football at 4, powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. It dropped this morning at 6 a.m. Check out the guys every Monday, Wednesday, Friday on the Inside the Birds podcast. Geoff Mosher's in the house today, and it's brought to you by PlaySugarHouse.com. Sign up now. They'll match your first deposit up to $250. And a lot of Eagles news to dive into, so let's get into it with Geoff as he appears via the Boardwalk Honda hotline. Geoff, I mean, there's so much going on. I mean, the Eagles, they're getting healthy all of a sudden. Who knew?
Yeah, how about that? For the first time, I think they've gotten more guys back than they've lost, right? Because they've got coming back today who practiced and 4 guys who are out. So anytime this team is net positive in the injury column is great news for them.
Yeah.
They've been net negative all year long.
All right, so let's go through some of the guys and what we can anticipate. Lane Johnson, Miles Sanders, Alshon Jeffrey, Malik Jackson. Those were the first 4 guys up. He said they're all day-to-day. Of those guys, Lane, Miles, Alshon, Malik, will any of those guys play on Sunday night?
Alshon will not play. I can't imagine it happening. Lane, I'm sure, is going to be one of those game-time decisions where he tests himself, but I wouldn't consider it. With Lane, I never to consider unlikely. He's one of the few he practice all week, but that doesn't mean he's not going to play. Most guys, if they don't practice, it means they don't play. But with Lane, we know that not practicing for him is kind of a good thing with the ankle because it gives him the rest that they said he needed. So we'll see if game time the ankle feels good enough for him to test it. I would almost hope they don't. I think Doug's being very duplicitous when he talks about it. And for example, today in his press conference, he said, we have to be smart as a coaching staff and as a medical staff. And then in the very next sentence, he said, but, Lane comes to us and tells us he's ready to go, then we're going to go ride it with Lane all the time. And I say, well, if you have to be smart as a coaching staff, as in a medical staff, isn't it then you as the head coach who has to say, help the player kind of save himself from him? I know it's great to have Lane out there, but is it great to have constant rotation? Is it great to have a guy who's not practicing all week get out there when a guy who has been practicing all week now is on the bench? It almost seems like wasted reps. So I have an issue with how they've handled Lane Johnson for the past few weeks here, and we'll see moving forward if he goes. I think Miles Sanders also a little bit very, very unlikely for him to play. We'll see as the week goes on. And who was the last guy you asked me about?
Malik Jackson.
Malik, it sounds like he was out there today, if I'm not mistaken. So maybe there's a shot they can get him on. It's quadrisphere, so I think like that one you have to see how it responds to some real practicing and see how it goes before you can make that determination.
All right, what about the next group of guys? Let's go to Jason Peters because there's a lot of people at practice today saying he was at left tackle. So Jason Peters, left tackle. It looks like Mailata was playing right tackle. But if Lane Johnson can play, do we think that Peters would play guard, or are they kind of sticking to their guns with Peters at left tackle?
Well, I think him playing left tackle is an indication that you're probably not going to see Lane Johnson play because that has enabled them to put Jordan Mailata at right tackle now. I don't think they want to practice that way all week and then have to make the decision to move Jason Peters back to left tackle. Lane Johnson plays right tackle, and Mailata's coming off the bench. That's not what you want. You want to continue his development and get the best guys that you've got out there. I think that what they're doing today is more of a reflection of where they want Matt Pryor to play. If you put Mailata at right tackle and Peters at left tackle, then you play, I'm going to assume, Matt Pryor at right guard, and Nate Herbig will go to left guard because you don't want Sua Opeta in there again. That was really an emergency start, and it did not go well. But if you take Mailata, leave him at left tackle, and put Jason Peters at right guard, then you have to play Matt Pryor at right tackle. I think they kind of like it better with Matt Pryor at right guard than right tackle. So, there's so many moving parts and so many different – it's not always about the individual, but it's how it impacts the entire line when they're making these decisions.
All right, two other guys, I guess. One, Dallas Goedert activated from the 21-day practice window. Do we anticipate that he could play on Sunday? And Jalen Reagor, also, he was activated last week, practiced today. What's the status of those two players?
Goddard, I'd be surprised. I think if there was a real optimism that he would play on Sunday night, then he would have been activated into the 21-day window on Monday, like Jason Peters and Jalen Reagor were. Here's what I know. He had the cast removed from his left thumb 2 weeks early, which was always a good sign of a quicker recovery than they anticipated. But they did not move up his timetable to return because they just didn't know how it would respond going forward. So it was always after the bye week. But his thumb has responded well to just catching footballs. They activated him on Monday to be able to get him that extra practice for the week because they don't normally get out there on a Monday, but this week they did. So they got up there Monday. I was told he had no soreness, no discomfort, no problems on Tuesday after having that kind of a workout on Monday. So he'll practice today. He'll practice Thursday. He'll do some light work Friday like they do. As long as there's no setbacks, as long as there's no discomfort, I think there's a pretty good chance he's going to play there because he's basically checked off all the boxes. And then it becomes a coach's decision on whether they want to use him or not.
All right, so let's say he does play. What is a fair expectation for Jalen Reagor? You know, the thumb you mentioned, but what about the lack of conditioning? We've seen them go on a snap count with Deshaun Jackson, albeit way later in his career. But, you know, when it comes to usage, what is fair out of Reagor?
Yeah, certainly not playing the entire game. I don't think that's a fair expectation. He was returning punts today in practice, and again, it's hard to know if that's, you know, part of the deal is that you're not going to play the full game, so we will have you return some punts, or if they were just getting him back to the floor of everything that he can do. But if he plays, he'll be out there, and if they're start a big play, I'm sure he'll be a big part of it. But they now have more healthy receivers than they've had in the past, right? Because they'll even with Deshaun down, they'll still have Fulgham, they'll still have Ward, they'll still have Hightower, they'll have Reagor, and you'll have Whiteside. So it's five guys right there who can on the field. So I'm sure there's some kind of rotation. And I would imagine with Fulgham entrenched at the X, although, by the way, Fulgham moves around a lot more than I realize. I've been doing a lot of tape study, and we have a special kind of show for our Sunday pregame show, some telestration technology that we've added to the show that'll show you just how good Fulgham's been. But I would imagine that Reagor is going to move around a little bit while Fulgham mostly plays the X.
Geoff Mosher, Inside the Birds podcast, a new one dropped this morning. We will take a look at a lot of different things here because obviously, as you mentioned, all these guys are starting to get back healthy. And how do you think this changes the offense now? Do you think that Doug is vanilla because of what he has? Does he open things up a little bit more? I guess, do you anticipate that? I don't know. I mean, as you said, we don't know if we're going to see Goedert this week. Probably don't see Miles Sanders, but they're trending towards getting back a full complement of weapons, at least. Does that change Doug's play calling?
Well, I think it changes the schematics of his offense in that, you know, they started off the year heavy 12 personnel. That's what they were last year more than every team. Obviously, they're down their number 1 and 2 tight end and getting better at wide receiver. So it enables them not only to play more 11 personnel like they've been doing the last week or two, but even get in some 10, you know, without, you know, if you want to take a tight end off the field and have a really kind of fast, dynamic, twitchy type offense and have 4 wide receivers out there, you have the ability to do that and really put stress on a Dallas defense. And my God, guys, I've seen some bad secondaries before, and we saw it with the Eagles last year with guys like Rasul Douglas and Sidney who get beat over the top. But you watch some tape on Dallas, and the number of just blown assignments and people standing around not understanding their own coverages in that secondary is just it's an unmitigated disaster. And so if you're Doug, you're thinking, yeah, I want to capitalize on that. I want to put my speed on the field as often as I can and maybe show that 10 personnel package and try to stretch the field.
And John Hightower can definitely do that. And I want to ask your thoughts on, you know, Hightower's role. As guys start to come back, you've seen that he has a home run ability. He started out struggling, making more of his opportunities as of late. As guys do return, how do you think Hightower's role is impacted?
Well, I think it actually allows you to be flexible with him, Hunter. and again, you're flexible with what you can do schematically. So Hightower is a guy who really impressed the team in training camp with his ability to learn multiple positions. His football intelligence, they told me, was really good and more than they even realized coming out of Boise State. So you've got Fulgham, you've got Reagor. You could theoretically put them in certain packages as your outside receivers and put Hightower in the slot. You could also put Reagor in the slot and put Hightower on the outside. But I like the idea of Hightower in the slot a little bit because, when it's 3rd and 3 and you're just trying to pick up that first down, you want Greg Ward in there because that guy has short area quickness and just the ability to get open in those short seams better than anybody on the team. But if you think about 2017, when they just made so many explosive plays, when Nelson Aguilar was really feeling it as a vertical slot, well, that gives you the real ability there to do that with Reagor and Hightower on the field, and one of them moves into the spot.
A lot of options with all of a sudden. You got a lot of options, and we'll see if they end up, evolving this offense a little bit. Let's, you take a look forward to, yesterday Jim Schwartz talked about Maddox, that he's the starter on the outside. What does this mean for, the Will Parks, Mills, that group of guys? How do they kind of work that now? I'm imagining Roby Coleman goes back to the slot.
Yeah, I think that's where the trickle-down impact is felt the best because Roby Coleman has been playing outside the last 2 games, which they can get away with because I guess the Giants, outside was there. And Slay was on Slayton, so Roby Coleman can get away with having to cover the other Giant receivers weren't as prolific. You'll go kind of moves around a little bit, but you saw that with NRC outside, the strap, Devon nickel, and he was abused by Golden Tate. He's a good player. I know everybody likes him, and he's a tough-minded player, but you don't want him on the field as much as he's had to be on the field lately. You want him as kind of your special teams guy and maybe your fourth corner in certain sub-packages. So having Avonte Maddox back to play the outside opposite Slay means that Nicole Roby Coleman can go back to playing the slot most of the time. They're also getting, as you mentioned, getting healthier at safety, so they want to play big nickel or dime. That's when those 3 safety looks come into play. Again, it just helps you kind of get your people you expected to be on the field for most of the snaps going into the year are now the people who are on the field, and you're not relying on your 4th and 5th string guys so much to play prominent roles.
Yeah, that's, it's interesting because now here they are starting to get healthy around the 8-game mark. And, this team has been a team, Jeff, over the years that has battled adversity. They've gotten into holes and they've dug themselves out of it. Are they a better team maybe than we've been giving them credit for if they're healthy?
Well, I mean, if they're healthy, yeah. I mean, obviously their injuries have been a big part of.
Well, I think most people have written this team off as it's just an awful team. The whole division's bad. I mean, if the Eagles are a healthy team, all season long, I mean, I know everybody goes through their injuries, but I'm just, is their roster more talented than maybe we give them credit for because they've been so bad?
I think if you ask most people what your expectations of the Eagles were going into the year, like when training camp started, they thought it was between the Eagles and the Cowboys for the division. So I think fans and media and people expected the Eagles to be in that 9-11 type win category. But the problem wasn't just the injuries, right? It was literally that they would suffer these long-term injuries, and then their backups were coming in and having injuries. And they played a couple of games there in a row where they were on 4th and 5th stringers all over the map. And it really started with the offensive line, and Carson was taking hits, and Carson himself wasn't playing well. And then obviously Deshaun getting hurt. I mean, it felt like all of the bad from the last 2 years hitting them even earlier than before, and it didn't seem like there was a light at the end of the tunnel, along with the fact that they couldn't even beat the Bengals. They had to tie them. That all kind of, I would say, came together in this perfect storm of maybe this team isn't that good. And I still think that question has to be answered. I mean, certainly they just barely beat a really bad Giants team, and if Evan Ingram catches the ball, we're having a totally different discussion about the Eagles, even with these guys coming back. The tale of this team will be told during that 5-game stretch against Cleveland, Green Bay, New Orleans, who am I missing? Arizona, and Seattle. So if they lose 4 or 5 or 3 of those games, it's just not it's going to be they are what we thought they were. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
As far as what we thought they were in late September.
Hey, when you look across to Dallas, I mean, they trade away Griffin, they cut Poe, they cut Worley today. Dalton's injured. I mean, are they waving the white flag? Is this how many team race is this?
Well, I thought that originally. I don't know what the deal with Griffin, but I do know that Worley had played awfully. So I don't know if they feel it's addition by subtraction. I think they're getting their cornerback, whose name is difficult for me to pronounce, Chidobe Awuzie.
Yep.
I butchered that.
No, you did pretty good.
Oh, okay. Well, I think they're getting him back, and so Worley became expendable. Look, I mean, they're starting Ben DiNucci, though, most likely at quarterback if Dalton can't go. And so that just becomes a situation where, as all the misery they have going on, the coaches questioning the players questioning the coaches, the inability for anybody to stand up for Dalton after he gets hit, the owner, exploding on sports radio yesterday. It's a mess. And then they have to go start most likely Ben DiNucci from JMU, a rookie. It's just not a good situation for them. I think it's as bad as it appears to be.
That being said, so is this a 2-team race, a 3-team race, a 1-team race? When you look at the NFC East,
yeah.
Well, we're halfway through the year. You got all 4 teams all have a stake to say we can win this thing, but how many of these teams legitimately do you think are in this race?
So if you guys remember, in the spring and summer, I talked about this a lot. I said, what Washington is doing, assembling all these guys on the front seven, this Montez Sweat, John Allen, and Chase Young, and Deron Payne, and Ryan Kerrigan, reminds me in a small way of how San Francisco went from really bad to really good because of that defensive front that they had last year. Now, they also were able to get Jimmy Garoppolo and healthy. So I said I felt Washington, if they somehow could find some stability at quarterback, you know what Ron Rivera brings, you know the culture he can instill, you know he's going to run the ball fairly well and have a very good emerging defense here. If they can get stability at quarterback, I think that they will be in it at the end of the season. I don't know if they'll win it, but I think they'll be in it, and I still believe that. And I wonder if in a few weeks, if Alex Smith, who is coming back from a major, major injury, he may never really, really start again or be the player that he was because of it. But Kyle Allen, you saw what he did against the Cowboys. He knows the scheme. Maybe he improves a little bit more each week because of that and because of what's around him. I think that Washington will be in it by the end. I'd be very surprised if we're not talking about them competing with the Eagles for that division title. I mean, the Cowboys are really going to have, if they don't get Dalton, I mean, even if Dalton comes back, it might be almost too late for them. I mean, they've got so many other issues going on with their injuries and their offensive line as well. But Washington, to me, has always been the sleeper, and I continue to not sleep on them.
Funny, the team that has probably the quarterback with the worst track record or the least track record is the team that maybe that some people like the most. So I guess we'll ask you, since everyone's been talking about it today, it sounds as if just going through your social media, you did not have a big issue with the Rays and their decision last night.
I didn't. I've heard you guys and Hunter talking about it today, Mike, and I don't have an issue per se either with you saying you would have done it differently. I have an issue with people throwing analytics under the bus and saying it's destroying the game, as Hunter has mentioned times without mentioning that the Dodgers, any other organization that didn't believe or didn't hold on to analytics, would have started Walker Buehler on 3 days, but they started for the second time a rotation of relievers, which is as analytically driven as it gets, but no one seems to be critical of their decision because they won. And so that to me means you go and look at the decision that he made to pull Kevin Cash made. Was it a bad decision or a bad outcome? I believe it was a bad outcome, not a bad decision. And I think that you see that all across sports where good decisions are made and bad outcomes happen, or bad decisions are made and sometimes good outcomes happen. I'll give you a perfect example. Doug Peterson going in for 2 against San Francisco, getting it. They go up 8-0 on their first touchdown. That is not analytics right there. That was Doug Peterson's gut. All right. And there is no analytic that tells you to do the 2-point conversion there. He did it because he was trying to jumpstart his team, which didn't really work because they didn't score a lot of points that game, but because they won by 4, I believe, and San Francisco would have had to kick the field goal at the end they could have tied it if he didn't do that, right? It makes it look like it was a genius analytical move, but it's not. And then it wound up biting him in the butt a week or two later when he tries to kick a field goal, again, using gut, right? Feel for the game. Tries to kick a field goal on Heinz Field. That's 57 yards when nobody's ever attempted it. I'm sorry, no one's ever been able to do that in that stadium before. So those are an example of a bad decision against the Niners that leads to a good outcome, a bad decision against the Steelers that leads to a bad outcome. And for me, for Kevin Cash, the evidence was there because in game 2, he did the same exact thing and won the game, and nobody said boo about it. So I don't think game 6 you have to deviate because your evidence tells you that you've already
To be fair,
done it.
I don't know. I think according to the ratings, no one watched game 2.
I don't think anybody watched until last night.
Yeah, well, that's true.
So
Exactly.
it was not a bad decision. I think you guys were right in what you said. Well, maybe they should have gone to a different reliever. Okay, I can go with that. That's true. The guy was struggling. I think
Yeah,
he was giving up a run in a couple of straight games.
I'm not bashing him for it. I just don't agree with it, and I would say I'm not killing him for it. I know that's what they do. I just wish, he had the, like you said, like the intuition to deviate from the script every once in a while. You're allowed to deviate from your script every once in a while. You don't have to follow it every time. Well,
I guess
that's a fair
why would
question.
he
Why would he?
deviate?
Is because because he has his best pitcher on the mound. That's why.
But that's the thing, that most teams consider that to be correct, that your starter is your best pitcher and your relievers are not. But the Rays are built so that their bullpen is their best asset. So in his mind, you're asking him to say, I want to go to not my best asset, right? Remember, in his mind, his bullpen is his best weapon.
Yeah.
So you're asking him to almost use a gut feeling that goes against the entire kind of culture that he's built and his gut feeling about who his best weapons are.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, Nick Anderson said after the game that he admitted he was tired and that he probably shouldn't have pitched. He was fatigued. I think those are things that need to be, in a 60-game season, 162-game season, you can't keep taking your starters out in the 5th inning every single night. They got to give you innings. Over a 60-game season, maybe, but you heard him last night say he was tired. And that's over a 60-game sample size. Over 162, how long can they get away with doing that? That's why on one night I say my best guy, I'm going to stick with him. And they didn't do it, and unfortunately they lost. But, hey, it's been great conversation, and we'll see. Baseball's done, and they lost.
No doubt about it.
All right, man, we appreciate the time.
Already.
I miss it already, too. All right, he, like all guests, appeared via the Boardwalk Honda Hotline, Football at 4, powered by the Inside the Birds podcast and brought to you by PlaySugarHouse.com.